A trap closed around Claire's wrist as the deaf Mafia boss stared at the forged note. The forged note lay cold in Adrian Voss's hand, and for one sharp second the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Claire's wrist was still caught in the trap, her pulse beating against steel, while the dining hall chandeliers threw pale light across the marble floor. The guests had gone quiet. Even the men who had laughed a moment ago now stared at Adrian, waiting to see whether the boss would punish the maid or the woman who had been framed in front of him. Adrian's eyes moved from the note to Claire's face. Something in her expression did not match guilt. It matched fear. "Read it," he said. The room stiffened. Claire's mouth parted, but no sound came. She had been set up to look careless, dishonest, easy to discard. Yet the note in his hand was too clean, too deliberate, too perfect to be real. Adrian noticed the tiny crease pattern at the edge, the kind left by a printer, not a hurried hand. A man near the back shifted his weight. Adrian saw it. "Take him." 2 guards crossed the room at once. The man tried to step away, but one guard seized his arm while the other pulled a folded sheet from his jacket pocket. It was the same paper stock, the same ink. A low murmur rolled through the guests. Claire finally understood. The trap was never meant to catch her mistake. It was meant to plant one. Her eyes lifted to Adrian, and in them he saw something sharper than gratitude, recognition. "Who gave you the note?" he asked. The man went pale. He opened his mouth, but the guards were already tightening their grip. That was when another guest rose too quickly from the table, knocking over his glass. The sound cracked through the room like a warning shot. Adrian did not blink. "Sit down." The guest froze, not because of the voice, but because everyone in the room could feel the shift. The power had moved. The accusation was no longer on Claire. It was on whoever had dared to use her. Claire's wrist was released. She flexed her fingers slowly, then straightened her apron, chin lifting by an inch. The small motion changed everything. She was no longer waiting to be judged. She was watching the men who had tried to bury her. Adrian studied her a moment longer, then handed the forged note to one of his men. "Find out who paid for this," he said. "And if anyone touched her again, they answer to me." The room went silent. Not the silence of fear alone, the silence of correction. Claire stood beneath the chandeliers, steady now, while the guests realized the joke had ended and the consequences had begun. And in that frozen, breathless stillness, Adrian made a decision that would not be taken back. "No one sets traps in my house," he said, "and no one lays a hand on her twice." Morning light came thin through the high windows, turning the marble foyer silver instead of gold. The trap had been removed, the blood cleaned, the laughing guests dismissed into shame. Yet the house still held the aftertaste of the night before. A servant carried away the broken metal spring on a velvet tray as if it were evidence from a crime scene. And at the far end of the corridor, a black-suited guard opened a door without a word. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, expensive paper, and coffee gone untouched. Across a wide desk, Adrian Voss waited with the same stillness that had silenced a room full of predators. He did not speak first. He signed. The movement of his hands was precise, spare, almost colder than speech. An older woman standing near the bookshelf translated in a calm voice. "Mr. Voss says you may sit if you wish." Claire remained standing. Her uniform had been replaced by a plain dark dress someone had pressed overnight, but it did not make her feel safer. It made her feel arranged. The band of red around her wrist, where the trap had snapped shut, throbbed under the cuff like a warning. She looked once at the windows, once at the door, then back at the man who had defended her in public and now watched her in private with unreadable eyes. The interpreter listened as Adrian signed again. "He had your name checked," she said. "Not for punishment, for truth." Something tightened in Claire's chest. A man like Adrian did not investigate out of curiosity. He investigated because facts were another kind of weapon. Her jaw set before she could stop it, as if dignity alone might keep the next blow from landing. But the translator's voice did not sharpen. It softened. "Your rent is 8 weeks late. St. Agnes Outpatient Clinic has sent 3 final notices. The patient listed is your younger brother, Elijah." The room did not move, yet Claire felt exposed more nakedly than she had under 100 staring guests. She said nothing. Adrian reached for a cream-colored folder and slid it across the desk. No dramatic gesture. No threat. Just paper moving over polished wood. Inside was a one-page employment contract, temporary and brutally simple. Live-in service position. For weeks. One of his private properties outside the city. Housing included. Triple what she made in 2 months at the restaurant. Paid in advance by noon if she signed. The interpreter glanced down, then up. He says it is legitimate work. No escorting. No entertaining guests. No illegal errands. You would help manage the household of a residence that requires discretion. Claire let out one dry breath that was not quite a laugh. Discretion, she said. From a man whose guards drag people by the throat. The interpreter hesitated, but Adrian had read the shape of the words from Claire's mouth before she finished. His face did not change. He signed with one hard motion. He says you are free to walk out. That landed harder than pressure would have, because now refusal was no longer resistance. It was a choice with a cost she already knew too well. Claire opened the folder wider. Alongside the contract sat copies of notices she had tried to hide in a kitchen drawer. Overdue rent, clinic warnings, a pharmacy balance, a red-stamped phrase that seemed to scream even in silence, final demand. Her cheeks burned. Someone in Adrian's world had entered the most fragile corner of her life and laid it flat beneath bright light. You had no right, she said. The interpreter listened, then looked to Adrian. He signed slowly this time, without the earlier steal. He says hunger does not wait for pride. Neither do landlords. Neither does illness. For the first time since entering the room, Claire looked directly at him instead of through him. There was no mockery there. No lust. No pity either, which somehow unsettled her more. Only assessment, and beneath it, something quieter, recognition. Not of who she was, but of how close ruin stood behind her. By noon, the estate had changed its shape around her. What had looked like rescue in the morning revealed its edges by afternoon. Locked side gates, silent cameras tucked into carved stone corners, men in dark suits who never blocked Claire's path outright, but somehow appeared whenever she strayed near a boundary she had not yet been told existed. Adrian's private property sat on the edge of the city like a velvet-lined fortress, all black iron, pale limestone, and windows too tall to feel human. The place was beautiful in the way expensive things often were, cold, exact, untouchable. And with every step she took across its polished floors, Claire understood the offer for what it was. Not charity, not freedom, a transaction dressed in silk. A woman in a charcoal skirt suit met her in a west corridor lined with oil paintings and dim brass lamps. Her name was Marta Leone, the estate manager, sharp-boned and silver-haired, with the kind of calm that came from surviving powerful men without ever needing to outshout them. She handed Claire a folded uniform, cream blouse, black skirt, apron stitched with no insignia, and a thin envelope already sealed. Your first week's advance, Marta said. Claire did not touch it. The envelope sat between them like bait on a trap spring. Rent, prescription refills, her mother's heart medication, the overdue electric bill folded on the table back at her apartment. Every number rose in her mind with cruel precision. But money given too quickly always came with invisible strings, and this house seemed made of nothing else. Marta watched her without blinking. You are not being asked to entertain guests. You will assist with meal service in the south wing, light cleaning in the private library, and errands inside the grounds only. You will not leave the estate without clearance. You will not discuss what you see here. If you do, the job ends immediately. A beat passed. You can walk away now, Marta added. If you can afford to. The words landed harder than an insult. Claire took the envelope. The paper felt heavier than cash should have. Her fingers tightened around it once, then went still. This was not surrender, not in the clean way the room seemed to expect. It was arithmetic. It was a woman choosing which kind of loss could be survived. I'll work, she said. Marta gave one small nod, as if a contract had just been signed without ink. The south wing was quieter than the main house, its long hallways softened by thick runners and the low hum of climate control hidden behind walnut paneling. Nothing there resembled the theatrical violence people imagined when they whispered Adrian Voss's name. No men counting weapons. No smoke-filled rooms. Only discipline. Doors closed precisely. Glass untouched by fingerprints. A kitchen run like a cathedral. Even the staff spoke in low, measured tones, as though noise itself might be punished. That was what unsettled Claire most. Not chaos. Control. She learned quickly because poverty had always demanded speed. Which trays belonged where? which guests were never to be looked at directly, which rooms remained dark even during the day, which staircase led toward Adrian's office, and which one led nowhere but a locked iron gate disguised behind velvet drapery. More than once she felt eyes on her, and each time she turned, there was only a guard at the far end of a corridor or the red blink of a camera half hidden in shadow. By early evening, the estate began to breathe differently. Cars rolled through the gates one after another, their headlights sweeping across the courtyard fountains. Men arrived in tailored coats and women in diamonds that flashed like little knives under the chandeliers. The air changed with them, tightening with perfume, old money, and unspoken fear. This was not a dinner party. It was a gathering where every smile carried inventory and every handshake concealed a calculation. Marta caught Claire at the service station just outside the banquet hall and adjusted the cuff of her blouse with brisk fingers. "You will serve the head table only," she said. Crystal stemware trembled faintly each time another guest took a seat at the head table, the vibration traveling through white linen, polished silver, and Claire's steady hands. Candlelight slid over black tuxedos and bare shoulders, over diamonds and champagne, over faces trained to look bored while measuring every weakness in the room. At the center sat Adrian Voss, still as carved stone, one hand resting near his untouched glass, his attention moving not by sound but by sight. Mouths, shoulders, fingers, the flicker of nerves under expensive skin. He did not need hearing to command the room. He only needed everyone else to know that nothing escaped him for long. Claire moved behind the chairs with a decanter of red wine, careful to keep her steps smooth on the dark parquet floor. Marta's warning still pressed against the back of her neck. "Serve the head table only. Speak little. Watch everything." Then a folded card appeared on her tray. It had not been there a second earlier. Only a small cream square, tucked beneath the edge of a bread plate, as if it belonged with the silver. No hand claimed it. No guest looked at her. But when she glanced up, one woman at the far end of the table lowered her eyes too quickly. Claire kept walking. At the service arch, shielded for half a breath by a velvet curtain, she opened the card with damp fingers. "Put this in his glass before the toast, or your brother loses his surgery slot." For a moment, the words lost shape. The kitchen heat behind her and the cold air of the banquet hall met at her skin like two different threats. Her brother's face rose in her mind without permission, thin, exhausted, joking through pain from a hospital bed he had already overstayed because money ran out faster than mercy ever did. A small packet had been taped to the back of the card. Not powder, clear drops in a tiny glass vial. Her stomach dropped. This was not a prank. Not another humiliation for sport. This was a command tied to blood. "Move," Marta hissed from behind her. Claire closed her fist over the card and stepped back into the light. The toast was coming. Crystal was lifted around the table. Adrian turned slightly as an older man to his right began speaking, his expression unreadable, his gaze sweeping the line of servers with the cold patience of someone used to betrayal arriving dressed as etiquette. Claire approached his place, sitting with the wine bottle in one hand and the hidden vial burning against her palm. She could pour it in. Save her brother for one more day, one more procedure, one more impossible bill. She could refuse. And watch the only person waiting for her in this world pay the price. The room narrowed to glass, breath, pulse. Then her eyes caught something she had missed before. Adrian's water glass sat nearest his left hand, but his wine remained untouched because he had already read the table and chosen not to drink what others poured first. Cautious, controlled, watching. The setup tonight had not begun with her. She was only the disposable middle. A choice hardened inside her. When she reached his chair, she stumbled on purpose. Wine splashed across the tablecloth in a dark red bloom. Several guests recoiled. A woman cursed under her breath as drops hit her dress. The vial slipped from Claire's sleeve, hit Adrian's plate, and spun once in the candlelight before coming to rest beside his knife. The room went silent. Adrian looked at the vial, then at Claire, then at her closed fist, where the corner of the cream card still showed between her fingers. No rage crossed his face. That was worse. With 2 fingers, he slid the card from her hand and read it. His eyes lifted slowly, not to her, but to the guests. One by one, posture changed around the table. An older senator reached for his napkin too fast. The jeweled woman at the far end stared at her lap. A knife dropped somewhere behind the dessert station, and the metallic crack split the silence like a gunshot. Nobody turned toward the kitchen. Every gaze remained fixed on Adrian, on the tiny glass vial catching candlelight near his hand, on the cream card that had exposed what polite conversation had been trying to bury. The orchestra in the corner had stopped without being told. Even the servers along the walls stood motionless, trays balanced like offerings no one dared receive. Then Adrian rose. The movement was simple, but power changed shape around it. Chairs scraped softly as three men near the far doors straightened at once. The senator who had reached for his napkin lowered his eyes. The jeweled woman at the end of the table pressed her lips together so tightly the color drained from them. Adrian did not look at Claire first. That was what made the moment colder. He turned the card over once in his fingers, then set it beside the vial with careful precision. His expression remained unreadable, carved from the same marble calm as the estate itself. Finally, he looked at her, not accusing, measuring. Claire felt every person in the room waiting for her to break, for tears, excuses, panic, some desperate scramble to prove innocence in a room already prepared to condemn her. Her pulse beat high in her throat, but the worst humiliation had already passed. They had tried to make her the spectacle. Now they wanted her to collapse and complete the picture. She did not. With steady hands, she reached into the pocket hidden in the seam of her black skirt and pulled out the folded cocktail napkin she had kept since service began. On it, in a dark streak of smudged lipstick and spilled wine, was a partial print from the jeweled woman's thumb and a line of numbers Marta had taught her to notice on imported pharmaceutical seals. Claire stepped forward and placed the napkin beside the vial. The room shifted. She tapped the number sequence once, then pointed to the silver ice bucket halfway down the table, where condensation still slid in thin streams to the cloth below. Earlier, when no one had been watching the help, she had seen the jeweled woman remove the vial from a satin evening bag beneath the table and pass it under the linen to the senator's waiting hand. Claire had not interrupted. She had watched. She had waited. And when the vial rolled near her tray after Adrian knocked the stemware aside, she had taken the chance to keep the one thing no liar expects a servant to keep: evidence. Marta, standing near the service doors, understood first. Her eyes sharpened. "Check the lady's bag," she said. The jeweled woman laughed too quickly, a brittle sound that broke in the middle. "This is absurd." One of Adrian's men was already moving. The bag was brought to the table. Inside, beneath a compact and a gold cigarette case, lay two more vials wrapped in a handkerchief embroidered with the woman's initials. A second card followed, smaller than the first, with one line typed in block letters. "Make it look like the waitress came alone." No one spoke. The senator pushed back from the table so fast his chair toppled. For one wild second, it seemed he might try to run. He made it only 2 steps before another suited guard blocked him with a hand flat to his chest. Crystal shuddered. Candle flames bent. Somewhere across the room, a guest exhaled a prayer under her breath. Adrian's face did not change, but something more dangerous than anger entered the air. He lifted his gaze to the senator, then to the woman, then to the host of smiling allies who had said nothing while a poor waitress was being arranged for ruin like part of the evening entertainment. He signed once, sharp and clean. Marta translated, her voice carrying through the hall. "No one leaves." The command landed like iron. Phones disappeared from hands. Guards sealed the doors. The orchestra members stared at their instruments as if music belonged to another life. The silence after Adrian's command was not empty. It was alive. At the head table, one guest lowered his eyes to the white linen as if it could hide him. Another reached for his glass and found his hand shaking hard enough to make the champagne tremble. Claire stood near the silver service card, her apron still neat, her palms still sore from the tray handles, while the room around her lost its appetite for cruelty. Marta remained beside Adrian, her expression unreadable, but her gaze moved with sharp purpose from face to face, counting fear, measuring loyalty, deciding where the rot began. The orchestra stayed frozen under the balcony, every violin silent, every bow lowered like a confession. "Read it," Adrian signed. Marta looked at the maid. The note. Now, for one suspended second, nobody breathed. The forged paper was brought forward by a guard, and when Claire saw the crease at the corner, she knew exactly who had handled it before her. Not the person who wrote it. The person who wanted it found. Her chest tightened. but her face did not break. She took the page with careful fingers and read the words once, then again, while the room watched her as if her shame were entertainment. "It was made to look like a warning," she said quietly. "But warnings are meant to protect someone. This was meant to trap me." A ripple moved through the guests. Not outrage. Recognition. The kind that comes when people realize they are no longer standing in a safe crowd. Adrian's jaw tightened. He turned slowly toward the man seated 2 places down from the senator, a polished financier with a gold watch and a smile too practiced to be real. The man's face had gone pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it again when Adrian lifted one hand. "Who paid you?" Marta translated. The financier laughed once, too fast, too thin. "I don't know what you mean." Adrian stood. The chair behind him did not scrape. It simply seemed to surrender the floor. He crossed the space between them with a stillness that made every step feel louder than a gunshot. Then he placed his hand flat on the table beside the man's plate, not touching him, only cornering him with calm. "Again," Marta said. The financier swallowed. His eyes darted toward the room, toward the exits sealed by guards, toward the people who had smiled too hard only minutes before. No one looked back at him. "It was supposed to expose her," he admitted. "That's all." "Who asked?" Marta pressed. The answer came in a broken breath. A name, then another. Then the ugly shape of a plan passed from one respectable mouth to another, each one pretending to be clean while handing dirt to the next. Claire heard it all. The room heard it too. And with each name, the humiliation changed shape. It was no longer about one waitress in a borrowed uniform. It was about a room full of powerful people who had quietly agreed that the weak could be used and discarded. Adrian's expression did not soften. It sharpened. "Take the guests' phones," he signed. The guards moved at once. One by one, the devices were collected and placed into a tray that had once held crystal flutes. The room's social armor vanished in a single sweep. No calls, no warnings, no stories rewritten by morning. Claire looked at the door, then back at the table, then at Adrian. For the first time all evening, she made a choice before fear could make it for her. She stepped forward, lifted the forged note, and held it high enough for everyone to see. "This was meant to take my name," she said. "It won't." The words landed softly. That was what made them dangerous. A senator pushed back his chair halfway, then stopped when Adrian's gaze found him. A woman at the far end began to cry without sound. The financier finally sank lower in his seat, as if the marble floor had become the only honest place left in the room. Silver clinked once against porcelain, thin and sharp, and the sound seemed to give the room permission to breathe again. Not freely, not fully, just enough for fear to move from one face to another. The forged note was still in Claire's hand, held steady above the white linen and crystal, while candlelight shook against the wax and made every eye in the banquet hall look guilty. No one spoke first. That was when Claire changed the shape of the night. Instead of handing the note back to Adrian, instead of waiting for his judgment to fall where everyone expected it to fall, she turned and placed the paper beside his untouched wineglass. Then she looked not at the terrified financier, not at the jeweled woman who had set her up, but at the row of staff standing rigid against the far wall. Men and women in black uniforms. Heads lowered, hands clasped. The kind of people no one at that table had bothered to see. "Check their cuffs," Claire said. Her voice was quiet enough to force attention. Several guests frowned, confused by the direction of it. Adrian did not ask why. He only lifted 2 fingers. The guards moved. Fabric whispered. Chairs scraped. A protest rose from one of the assistant servers before a guard folded back the starched cuff of his sleeve and revealed a dusting of silver glitter caught in the seam. The same cosmetic glitter that had come off the jeweled woman's evening wrap when she brushed too close to Claire in the service corridor. Another cuff was checked, then an apron pocket. From inside came a hotel key card wrapped in a linen napkin. The room went colder. Claire watched the objects appear one by one as if they had been waiting all night to confess. A duplicate estate key, a burner phone, a second folded note, unfinished this time, written in the same slanted hand as the first forgery, but with one line crossed out hard enough to tear the paper. Not a trap laid in panic. A trap rehearsed. The assistant server began to shake. "I didn't write it." "No," Claire said, turning to face him at last. "You carried it." He froze mid-breath. Earlier that evening, while everyone had watched the head table, Claire had noticed what no one powerful ever noticed. Who was afraid of whom? The young server had not looked at Adrian with fear. He had looked at the financier. Every time the man lifted a glass, the server's shoulders locked. Every time the jeweled woman smiled, he flinched as if a bruise had memory. Adrian's gaze shifted, reading the same truth too late to be called mercy and too early to be called justice. "Bring him here," he said. The young man was pulled forward, shoes slipping against polished marble. Up close, he looked barely 20. His lip was split at one corner, old swelling hidden badly beneath powder. A murmur moved through the guests, not of sympathy, but calculation. They were trying to guess how much of this could still be buried. Claire took one step closer to the server, enough to make the guards tense. Enough to make Adrian rise halfway from his chair. Then she did the one thing no one in that room expected. She held out the forged note to the terrified boy. "Read the crossed out line," she said. His eyes widened. "I can't." The lie landed dead. Adrian's expression changed first. Not with anger, with precision. He looked at the unfinished note, then at the server, then at the financier. The staff records, the forged placement, the chosen victim, the silent boss everyone assumed could be manipulated because he listened differently than other men. The trap had never only been for Claire. It had been built to make Adrian sign a false personnel transfer during the dinner chaos, then attach his household to a theft ring moving cash and art through service corridors under his own sealed authority. Claire had been selected because debt made her vulnerable and invisibility made her disposable. If the forgery held, she took the fall. Claire understood the true shape of the trap one heartbeat before everyone else did. And in that single heartbeat, the balance of power shifted away from the men who had built their empire on her silence. The forged transfer form was still on the lacquer tray beside the head table, tucked beneath a folded dessert menu, waiting for Adrian's seal. The room remained pinned under the weight of his earlier command, under the shame of exposed faces and arrested gestures. Candlelight trembled against crystal. No one dared rise. No one dared speak. But Claire was no longer standing inside the night as its victim. She was looking at the paper, and then she was looking at the ink. Her hands did not shake this time. The senior house steward, the one who had adjusted her blouse and positioned her like decoration, had signed the witness line too early. Not with his usual formal signature, but with the quick slanted mark he used on supply receipts in the downstairs office. Claire had seen it for weeks while sorting invoices no one believed she was intelligent enough to read. In the margin, near the transfer code, there was another mistake, smaller and deadlier. The route number for the West Service Corridor had been written in a numbering system that belonged to the old wing, retired 6 months earlier after the fire inspection. Only someone inside the estate would have known enough to fake authority. And only someone careless enough to despise a waitress would have assumed she knew nothing. Claire stepped forward before Adrian could reach the tray. "Don't sign it." Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Every eye turned. Even the orchestra, frozen in their black suits, seemed to lean toward the sound. Adrian lifted his gaze to her face, reading the certainty there, the calm, the refusal to bend. He said nothing. He did not have to. For the first time that night, the room was waiting on her. Claire picked up the paper and turned it toward the light. Then she crossed the distance to the steward and placed it in front of him with almost gentle precision. "You signed the wrong hand," she said. He blinked once. Too slow. The financier at the end of the table stiffened. The jeweled woman shut her eyes. A senator muttered a curse under his breath. Claire went on, each word clean as glass. She pointed to the route code. She named the retired corridor. She named the inventory logs that would show the mismatch. She named the camera blind spots used only by staff supervisors. Piece by piece, she stripped the scheme of its sophistication until it looked exactly like what it was, a theft ring dressed in luxury, built by people who thought service workers were too small to witness their crimes. The steward tried to laugh. It came out broken. "You think anyone will believe you?" Claire turned, not to the room, but to Adrian. That was the final reversal. Because she did not ask him to save her. She handed him the truth and let him decide what kind of man he would be in front of the entire world that had come to feed at his table. Adrian took the document, studied the signatures, then pulled a slim black notebook from inside his jacket. Earlier in the evening, while others had mistaken his silence for absence, he had been writing. Times, names, seating shifts, delivery changes. He had tracked the room the way other men tracked weapons. He placed the notebook beside the forged order, open to a page where the steward's movements had been logged down to the minute, including the moment he left the banquet floor under the excuse of checking the wine vault. He had seen more than they imagined. He had simply been waiting for certainty. When Adrian looked up, his expression was colder than rage. It was judgment without heat, marble without mercy. He signed nothing. Instead, he lifted his hand once.